This is Ben Borg.
This is Katrina Borg.
This is Claire Green.
This is Maggie Morgan. And this is the More Than Macros podcast.
This episode of the More Than Macros podcast is brought to you by Married to My Macros, performance nutrition coaching. Married to My Macros is a personalized one-on-one nutrition coaching service providing the highest level of support to clients with the practical tools and accountability needed to improve health, physical performance, and body composition through diet. While this podcast will fuel your mind, let the team at Married to My Macros fuel your body.
All right. Well, welcome back to another episode of Ben and Kat's IVF journey. Today, we're going to be talking about something really special that Kat worked long and hard on throughout the 9 months of her pregnancy to bring you all, anyone out there who is thinking about getting pregnant, who is pregnant, who's recently given birth. Kat spent a lot of time putting together this really amazing resource. It's called MTMM's Guide to a Healthy Pregnancy, Nourishing Mom and Baby Through Pregnancy and Beyond. So we're really excited to sit down and talk to Kat about this in a little bit more detail. Obviously, we've been, there's been a lot going on behind the scenes to put this together. So we're really, really excited about it. But I think that it would mean a lot to everyone to kind of understand why we decided to create this, why Kat specifically wanted to put it together, and just delve a little bit more into the topics that are included. So yeah, do you want to start out by maybe going through kind of what the process was to get this started?
Yeah, so I think we are always kind of on the hunt for resources that we can put together for our clients that just lay everything out really clearly, really simply, and give them kind of actionable go-to items for their nutrition. And obviously pregnancy is a huge topic within that is useful kind of throughout to a very particular segment of our population. But then when I became pregnant myself and was struggling with my nutrition, it was, okay, I have all of this knowledge and I know all of these, and I've done, I spent a really good bulk of my master's on kind of perinatal nutrition, but putting it into action was still really difficult. And so I was like, oh, how good would it be if we could just put something together for our clients and non-clients so that they had that go-to. I think personally for myself, I have always really struggled to just do something. If you tell me to do something, it's not necessarily going to get done unless I have that proper motivation, which is why am I doing it? And nothing is more true than kind of the pregnancy nutrition. It's very difficult when you are feeling crappy, when you're having food aversions, when you lose your appetite, when you only have appetite for certain things, when you're having headaches or you're nauseated or you're just too tired to put together meals. And certainly that's even more so true, I think, like maybe not with your first child, but as you kind of carry on, it can be really, really difficult to find that motivation to properly nourish yourself. And so understanding for me the why behind what we need to consume was so vital. And so that's kind of what we've done with the pregnancy ebook, is we've tried to take, okay, this is why we're doing it, this is what the effect is, and this is how we can apply it and put it all together for people. My intention was to keep it really kind of like brief and snapshot and to the point, and it ended up being like 90 pages or something like that. Like, it's a huge ebook, but there's recipes and stuff in the back, so it's not like 90 pages of dense reading. But yeah, and kind of in creating it during that process, it was really helpful for me to kind of be like, yep, this is, what I need to do, and this is why I need to do it, and gave me that little bit of a boost when all I wanted to eat was like white things.
White things. It sounds like my mom.
Yogurt, cauliflower. That's about it. Ice cream, maybe.
Bread.
yeah,
I
bread.
think that resonates with me a lot. Like thinking back to when I first started paying attention to my nutrition and got a nutrition coach. I really, really wanted to know the whys behind what I was doing, and it was just that much more motivating to then stick with it. I find that not everyone is like that, but it is an approach I do try to take with many of my clients, those who, do kind of respond that way. So I think that probably resonates with a lot of people, pregnant, not getting pregnant. I think it can still relate.
And if you don't necessarily need to know the why to put something into action, and you just want like the charts and the graphics, or like the calculations, the lists, checklists, all that stuff, that's all in there too.
Yeah, take it from start to finish. And there's a lot in here. So what sort of topics, were your favorite ones to write? I mean, the ones that you got most excited about.
I think probably my favorite one to write, and this kind of holds true throughout a lot of the study that I've done in recent months and years, is the prenatal, so like the preconception nutrition, and why it's so important. And I think that's such a huge part that we miss. For some women, you may know that you're trying to get pregnant or planning or going through IVF like we were, and for other people it might be a total surprise, and so you might not necessarily get that window for the preconception nutrition. But I think that one is the most interesting for me to write, because there's such a massive impact on the maternal diet has from the time prior to getting pregnant on the long-term health outcomes of the child. So when we look at chronic disease, things like heart disease, diabetes, incidence of stroke, high blood pressure, kind of all of those things that we're fighting so hard against within society, what research has shown us in recent years is that a lot of that is influenced by the maternal diet preconception, and it's not necessarily something that's influenced as strongly by the diet during pregnancy or the lifestyle choices postpartum. So what I'm not saying that those illnesses and conditions aren't influenced by those other kind of timed events, but that, oh my gosh, the preconception nutrition has such a big impact that we didn't realize until recently. And you can positively modify that. So that was really cool. I think in particular talking about like maternal fat stores and the composition of your fat mass and your omega balance within that has a big impact on your breast milk and on the child's fat stores at birth. And so that's kind of, I think, one of the coolest things.
And like you said, it's understanding that why. And I think that goes almost to like another level, because when we're used to paying attention to our nutrition, we're typically doing it for selfish reasons. And so I think it's difficult to kind of make that switch to making these choices for not only yourself, right, but how it's going to impact someone else's life pretty significantly too, right?
100%. And I think that, like watching Ben, who's done his like birth fit certification and stuff recently, while I was pregnant, go through that, and they talk about one of the big things in there is that a person is considered like a person that you're training is considered pregnant the moment they become pregnant. It's not at 12 weeks, or it's not at 16 weeks, or it's not when the bump starts to impede the bar path. Like from the second that they become pregnant, they need to be treated a little bit differently, because hormonal levels change and things like that. But also a big thing is it takes it's not necessarily this automatic switch to change the mindset, right? And to change, especially if you're someone who's been really dialed in your nutrition, you have a reason for doing it and you have a way of doing it. And it becomes really difficult for some women to make that switch for, this isn't just about me anymore, and I need to consume X, Y, and Z, and for some people, dependent on the situation, like if someone's been eating a vegan diet, maybe they're able to maintain that, but maybe they need to start consuming some things that weren't previously in line with what they were eating, right? For someone who has kind of always struggled to eat a large amount of food, whether that be mentally or physiologically, they need to start doing that. And it's about more than yourself. And for some women, that switch is really easy to make, and it's just automatic, and they become a mother the second they're pregnant, maybe even before. And for a lot of women, it's not automatic. And it's not a bad thing that isn't automatic, but it's kind of, even though you may feel connected, it's really quite a difficult step to take that. I know, even to use a completely weird example, but when I was in labor with Matea, we had quite a rough labor, if you've listened to that podcast, and we had some pretty touch and go situations. And there were some points in there where the doctors were saying like that there's no more choice anymore. We need to do this intervention sort of thing. Or you need to get her out in 2 pushes. And it was, all I could focus on was the pain. Like I couldn't focus on her and having her at the end and doing it for that, because I was so entrenched in it. And then once she was here, and now having her and having had her for a few months, especially, it's like, I can't imagine there isn't anything that I wouldn't do for her. But I'm the first person to admit that as much as I felt connected to her throughout my pregnancy, there was still a little bit of a disconnect until we had her. And so having to change your mindset into I'm pregnant from the moment I'm pregnant, and then start changing your dietary patterns and your workout patterns for something that is maybe like a little bit of a, not a hypothetical, but like it's not a concrete idea. It can be really tough.
Yeah. I never really thought about it to that extent, but I can only imagine. So definitely having all of this knowledge and having done all this research and everything like that, I think would be really important. I feel like there's a lot of information out there, and maybe a lot of misinformation as well when it comes to pregnancy, nutrition, and all things involved. So I think that this is probably, I know for a fact, this is a good resource to kind of help weed through all of that information that's out there. Are there any like big, I guess, myths or misinformation that's out there that you came across or have come across in the past that you maybe just want to take an opportunity to kind of like set clear?
I'm sure there are, because I know that there's like little pearls of that buried in there. And I know I kept referring to like, oh, your aunt's advice might not be applicable there. What were they though? I mean, I think that, one that probably, like, I think honestly, the one that surprised me the most, the one that I didn't even know so much about, was the alcohol postpartum. And how you need to manage that if you are breastfeeding. And it's very different than what I ever thought it was. And so we've got some like apps and some kind of advice for how to manage that in there, and the actual like how to, because postpartum, a little bit in moderation can be safe if you go about it the right way. And in my head, I had it completely the wrong way. So that was really interesting on a personal level to me.
What did you think that it was?
I thought that like you just like pumped and dumped, and if and it's so long as you pumped and then threw out that milk that you was accumulating while you were consuming alcohol, that it was totally fine. And I didn't realize that it was completely a time mitigated thing, and that alcohol will dissipate from your breast milk over a period of time. So the only reason you would need to pump and dump is if you were engorged and you needed to offload some of that milk, but that you do need to have a very clear plan and clear monitoring of your timelines and how much you've consumed in order to safely breastfeed hours down the road, right? So definitely not saying you can breastfeed while you're drinking. That's not at all what I'm saying. But the method in which you go about it was very different than what I had thought. So there's that.
Not so black and white.
Yeah, or just it has changed over the years. And so advice that was given years previous is not necessarily applicable now. And, that's, I mean, kind of true of different things, even like caffeine, during pregnancy. And like, yes, you can absolutely have an amount of caffeine, but you definitely don't want to overconsume it, right? A lot of the foods that are kind of no-goes while you're pregnant, most of them are quite cautious, and it's simply because we want you to avoid any sort of foodborne illnesses, which you're more susceptible when you're pregnant because of your progesterone levels increasing, right? So just different things like that. I think, the weight gain during pregnancy and how much you need to eat has always been a really contentious matter. And so there's a really good chunk of the book is dedicated to that, is kind of looking at how much weight should you expect to gain, kind of at which rate should you expect to gain it based on the 3 trimesters, and how you need to eat in order to gain that dependent on your activity levels. Now, the one thing that I try to be really clear about in the book, and I'm always really clear about when I talk to my client, is yes, these are like the ideal parameters that we have, and this is kind of what we expect to see, but there's huge variation across the board, and it is absolutely okay if you fall outside of those ranges, so long as, you know, your things are progressing normally, your doctor's happy, all of your test results are coming back normal, right? So I think the first trimester is probably the most extreme example of that, where it's like, yeah, we ideally want you to gain about 5 pounds in your first trimester. But certainly I had, you know, and I've had clients who have gained nothing. I've had clients who have lost weight because they've been so sick, or myself who went through IVF and had a huge weight spike with the actual IVF process at the beginning. I think I gained like 7 kilos in my first trimester. So what was really interesting is, you know, I had clients kind of who were pregnant at the same time as me and going along in the same timelines, and we gained in completely different ways. I had one client who gained nothing in her first trimester. I gained 7 kilos. And then at the end of our pregnancies, we had gained almost the exact same amount. Our babies weighed almost the exact same, you know? Mm-hmm. And so it's just, there's a little bit of like, yes, this is what we can expect, but the body's pretty amazing and it does what it needs to do, right? So long as you're giving it the basics.
Yeah. And I think that with pregnancy too, it's often to feel, I guess, pretty anxious about something not going right. So knowing that there's, it's not like black or white, or this is what happens, this is what doesn't happen, or this is what shouldn't happen. And we've, learned a lot about that throughout your entire experience too, from the beginning of the IVF to catching up with you a couple weeks postpartum. So I guess it's a good opportunity as well to just see how things are going at this point. Matea is almost 7 weeks old.
Yeah, 7 weeks tomorrow. So she's got her first set of vaccinations tonight, which I'm sure will be no fun at all. No, things are going really well. We're very lucky for the most part. She's really good. And we'll start like kind of pre-pregnancy, and maybe the bookends of our pregnancy were a bit rough. Mm-hmm. We've had it pretty good. So 7 weeks postpartum. I am now like back into tracking my food again. I'm building up my workouts, which is very difficult to call them that. And everybody's a little bit different. I basically took the first 4 weeks to do nothing but walking. So I, by day 4 postpartum, was walking about 45 minutes a day, which is a much faster progression than is generally recommended. But I had in the end, I guess what we would call an uncomplicated vaginal delivery, for the fact that there were very minimal interventions used, and I was walking, our Roddy up until including the day that I gave birth. Mm-hmm. So walking lots of hills, stuff like that. So it wasn't that abnormal. So I was able to progress my walking really, really quickly. But I had no kind of desire or need to push the postpartum recovery for the first 4 weeks, just because I'd had such issues with my pelvis as well and was trying to let that recover a bit. So now I'm slowly, from kind of weeks 4 to week 6, did a lot more of like the rehabby stuff, the bird dogs and the glute bridges and the diaphragmatic breathing and all of that. And now I'm getting into some kind of strict work. I'm finally on my push present. We bought like a Concept 2 erg bike. Yay. For the last couple of weeks, and that was like the best purchase I think we ever could have made. Honestly, I love it. Initially I was like, well, I'm just going to start tracking my food, and I won't necessarily like really aim for set goals, but I mean, you got to put the goals in anyways. Yeah. Right?
And your type A personality didn't go anywhere, so.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess what I'm doing is I am aiming for goals, but I have my intake quite high. Even maybe a little bit higher than it needs to be for my activity level, which means that I'm not really seeing any movement on the scales. I'm not seeing any weight loss right now, which I'm totally okay with because 6 weeks in, breastfeeding should be pretty firmly established. But we've also just started giving her a couple bottles of express breast milk. So I just want ample stuff on board to keep that really kind of smooth. Because I know once you can, if you get into supply issues, it just becomes like an unnecessary stressor. And sometimes it's completely unavoidable and there's nothing you can do about it, but I will do everything in my power to avoid getting into that situation, right?
So. And we were having a little bit of a conversation prior to starting this recording about your current diet and how it looks pretty repetitive. So are there specific foods that you're really craving all the time now, or do you have any aversions at this point? Or is there anything that you found that maybe Matea doesn't like?
So I would say that my food cravings at this point are 100% behavioral.
Right.
I don't think there's any physiological basis for it. I'm like addicted to dried mango though. It's so bad. Ben the other day was like, quite seriously, it was like, do you think you maybe like have a little bit of an addiction to dried? I was like, yes, 100%, yes.
100%.
And that was just because right in around that labor and delivery period, that was something that we had packed in the hospital bag, was a lot of dried fruit, and then I just fully fell into it. So that's something I'm weaning myself off currently because it's a pretty high sugar content, right? So that's definitely been a staple though. Ben started making me stuffed peppers while I was like in the hospital. So for that one day that I was there, and literally this week is the first week where I've said, okay, no more stuffed peppers. Like
no more.
I've eaten them every day for almost 7 weeks, and I'm ready to move on now. But that's something I always do, as I always kind of go for like, that'll be, have that meal. So I'm doing that. I'm doing a lot of like just salads and chicken. I'm a little bit more reliant on protein powder than I'd like to be. But just trying to get my protein up again, which was pretty slack throughout my pregnancy. Definitely hit my goals during pregnancy, but wasn't hitting my kind of pre-pregnancy levels, which is, especially while I have my calorie intake quite high and I'm not super concerned about weight loss, I want to keep my protein really high because if anything, that is maybe going to help counteract that a little bit. It's not that I don't have weight to lose. I absolutely do. It's just not my first priority right now. I have no problem taking a kind of gradual approach to that, which is not a common attitude in society. And I think maybe if we weren't in lockdown, it might be a little bit harder to have that attitude. But right now, I'm just kind of letting my body dictate. As for Matea, we are going to the doctor today, and I'm really hopeful that she doesn't have a cow's milk allergy. I've not been eating a lot of dairy, but I've been eating a little, and she's just started to have these skin outbreaks this week, and we don't know if that's like a normal 6-week thing or if that's maybe an allergy. So fingers crossed that the doctors say it's not, because more so like I have no problem giving up dairy, that's fine, but it's more so it's like, what if it isn't the cow's milk, and what if we now have to start systematically removing and trying to figure out what that is. It's just it's tough, and I've worked with lots of women who've had to do it postpartum, and it's super annoying because you're just trying to get your schedule sorted and you got to grab foods as you're going sometimes, and it just adds another layer of complexity.
Yeah. Is that common to have a cow's milk allergy, like for newborns?
It is the most common allergy for newborns, but it's not that common to see it when they're being exclusively breastfed. So, and typically if they had a true allergy, you would start to see some pretty ominous signs, things like blood in the stool for them, which we're not seeing. So it kind of makes me a bit hopeful. When you would see it really start to crop up is once they start transitioning over to solids, and you start, maybe trialing them with a little bit of yogurt or something like that, and they're directly ingesting it. That being said, definitely like, lots of women, you know, will say, oh, like babies not just spitting up with every feeding, but like vomiting, right? Or blood and stool. Those are more indicative of cow's milk allergy in breastfed babies.
Gotcha. Well,
but I'm like, of course, with my head,
hopefully
like,
for you.
Yeah, I'm like, oh no, not just cow's milk, but what if it's eggs, or what if it's mango?
Yeah.
Which actually is probably the best thing for me, but
yeah. Well, I'll be interested to hear what comes of that appointment tonight and how she does with her shots.
Yeah, poor little thing.
Poor little
She
thing.
banged her head off my shoulder last night and was just like, wah! And I was like,
You're like,
oh, like broke my
you have
heart.
no idea what's coming for you.
Yeah, I was like, this is a preview to tomorrow.
Oh, I'm sure she'll be just fine. Strong like her mama. Yeah.
She'll make it.
She'll make it. Good. And Ben's good?
Ben is great. Ben is killing it. Like, honestly, newborn, he's working his ass off. We're still in lockdown here. He's getting in, you know, he does the training session every day. And because we don't have all, like, our gym is set up at his mom's house, so we don't have all of our equipment here. So he's really like, okay, I've got dumbbells, I've got wall balls, I've got the erg bike, I've got a row, I've got this, what can I do? And we'll smash out a workout. So he's like incredible, holding everything together.
Good. Well, if anyone,
don't tell him.
if anyone wants to hear a little bit more detail on that, there's an episode of Ben and his other dad friends. They talk a little bit about their experience thus far, which is very entertaining. So yeah. Great. Well, thank you so much for sharing everything with us today. And I'm really excited for people to see the work that you put into this ebook. So we'll obviously leave the information below so that anyone can go and download it if they're interested. If you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to us or Kat. We'll be happy to answer any questions you have.
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. All right. Well, we'll catch up with you soon. Good luck at your appointment tonight. Hopefully it is not cow's milk allergy.
It's just like overprotective mom. That's all.
Yeah. Maybe we can let the listeners know in the comments below.
All right.
Okay. Talk to you later.